Hello, my name is Heather Murphy, the founder of the Collaborative Divorce Network, a network which brings professionals together to help people through the transition of divorce. Today we thought it'd be important to introduce you to two wonderful people, Jackie Epsler and Jolene Trotta with the Domestic Violence Service Network, DVSN. It's no surprise that domestic violence rates have skyrocketed due to COVID-19 and being trapped in the home with your perpetrator. Whether you're a man, you are a female, you are a child, you are a parent, it doesn't matter who you are. It's happening to everybody. We thought it'd be important to introduce you to some hotlines, some advice, at least a place to go for more information if you feel like you're in trouble or you know somebody who's in trouble. Providing a safe space or allowing people to get the information that they need to create their safe spaces. We hope you enjoy this information, find it extremely helpful, and can pass it along to those who need it. Thank you very much.
Giving our clients an opportunity to feel heard and validated. And, we're there to help, we're there to listen and help assess their risk and safety plan if we need to, and offer resources if we need to, but really we're there to empower them to make these decisions on their own and to know that they have it in them to do that, and they have the strength, and we're there sort of as their cheerleaders, or to really encourage them to do what is best for them.
Abuse is what people think is domestic violence. So if you don't have a broken arm or obvious bruises, well, it's probably not domestic violence. And in fact, the clients themselves may believe that to some extent. Now, the law, in order for it to be a crime, physical abuse and or threat of physical abuse is a component of that to make it a crime. But the really devastating abuse is the emotional. You mentioned the word gaslighting. It's an excellent example of how you can kind of drive somebody a bit crazy over time, where they don't trust their own decisions. They don't trust their own perceptions. And gaslighting is a huge component of that. Psychological abuse and that emotional abuse, demeaning someone tremendously, calling them names, telling them how inadequate they are, telling them that no one else would care about them. Only this person, the abuser, cares about them, and training them. I need to help you be better, than you are, and whatever that looks like, so that person starts to lose a sense of self and a sense of self-worth and value. There's certainly, we've talked about financial abuse, which is a huge component. Almost all of our clients have some level of financial abuse. Even if they're professional people working, often they may not have control of their finances at all. We've had a few clients that have, and they will point to that as being able to get out because they had the financial wherewithal to do it. But there aren't many of our clients that have that. There's spiritual abuse, and is the holy books. Are holy books used and scriptures used against the client? Are they made to worship in ways they don't agree with, or are they being kept from worshiping what they care about? Using children as pawns and turning children against them is a major piece of that as well. There's just so many aspects to this, and one of the ones that, in addition to financial abuse being so prevalent among our situations, is sexual abuse. There's tremendous sexual assault and sexual abuse and forced sex, or neglect in some ways, or some other humiliating ways in which a partner is made to perform, maybe to get money for the food, maybe to get something else, or just because that person wants you to be humiliated. I mean, it was just amazing how these abusive partners work to work away at what's strong for you and keep you separated from anyone who will be able to validate who you are and the value you bring.
That's a really good point. So would you mind talking a little bit about that proxy and we had this great conversation about the fact that it doesn't have to be the person that is actually being abused, but maybe a family member or whatnot. Could you just speak a little bit about that?
Could be a family member, a coworker, a neighbor, perhaps one of the professionals in your collaborative, our collaborative that we're part of it with you. It could be anyone calling us to get some advice about how best to interact with that person to help them. We don't expect anybody who's a proxy, family member, friend, or coworker to be able to solve the problem or understand what they should do next. But the best thing they can do is to refer them to agencies such as ours, because we're well trained to be able to work with those people. But we can help them think about how they listen to that person, how they don't judge that person, not to blame that person, things that are almost in some ways go against what our initial reaction is. You know, you want to help a person because you're a friend, and that's your expectation, is that I should give them something, I should tell them to do something, when in fact that might be the very least thing you should do for them at that point in time.
This happens to every single demographic out there, meaning that it doesn't matter how much money you make. It doesn't matter what your education level is. This is something that's real for everybody. Everybody it could be at risk here. So not just judging people. You can't just go in and say, oh my gosh, that person lives the most wonderful life in the world. Or that person over there looks is angry and nasty, but you have no idea what's going on behind closed doors. And if there's a message for people as far as, going out in the world and being able to judge people, which, what would be your best advice? Because you go into these homes, and these homes sometimes are these massive homes, and then sometimes you're going into these, smaller apartments, but regardless, everyone's dealing with the same pain. So what would you have for just an overall thought on that, or advice towards how we should treat others?
When looking at anyone's lives, regardless of what things might look like, I think that it's important to have sort of a judge-free mind when doing so. And it can be hard to do, and being approachable and open-minded, so that if someone does want to, feels that there's an opportunity to sort of disclose something, that they have an opportunity to do that. And that's what I try to do. It's mind-blowing to learn where domestic violence occurs, and it happens everywhere.
You just mentioned that COVID-19. So this is, and of course, the reason for the need to get this webinar out there for people to see, right, is it has elevated the cases that you are seeing with domestic violence. And so just being able to kind of talk a little bit about what you've really seen as a direct result of COVID out there.
Well, what we're seeing now is people who are actually trapped with their abusive partner are really hesitant to reach out. They don't have the sense that, they often feel hopeless and they feel alone, and we try to mitigate that. But even now, it's very difficult to even reach out, to have a private time or private space to do that, to be able to believe that someone's going to be out there and isn't closed somehow. To really not understand what the role of the police would be under these circumstances. So it's really a much scarier time for these people, because they're so constrained in so many ways. So the hope was already light and weakened, and now it's really kind of being drained. So what we're seeing is that people, when they do reach out now, they're probably at a more egregious point, because it's just so bad now they have to risk making the outreach, and more of the just an average argument kind of thing. What we're concerned about is that there used to be the process to get a restraining order was always very traumatic and traumatizing and difficult. What we're finding now is it's now added a whole other layer, because we used to be with them and walk with them and be able to help them work on their paperwork and all of that right next to them. Well, they don't have that anymore. We can't be right next to them. So right now, the process at the moment with the courts closed is if they want to get a restraining order, which again is a dangerous thing to do, and we talk to them about that, but if they choose to move forward with a restraining order, they now go to their local police department. And if they're one of our 13 partners, or at least the 12, one is Hanscom, but the 12 municipalities, then our police are able to call us so that we can be on the call with that particular client to help them with the paperwork. So those are the basic pieces that we're going to be seeing, and COVID-19 is making some of those much more intense, in addition to basic needs such as food, which is very real. So we are finding ourselves having to connect them more to those kinds of basic service resources, getting food, getting emergency funds for being able to manage rent, etc. So those are always needs, but they become more heightened recently. But those kinds of things, the legal, housing, financial, their children, therapy, support groups. We do have a helpline, which is in the materials that we'll be distributing. And that helpline, we get a number of calls, maybe about 300 or so a year in a typical year. And then we have another 600 or so referrals from our police partners of the 13 communities with whom we partner very closely. And in those communities, we follow up with police reports that are, or incidents that are identified as domestic abuse of some sort, but domestic basically. And then we also have a very robust court program where we have volunteer advocates at the court on a regular basis. And then we also go with our clients to court for petitioning for restraining orders, typically 209A restraining orders, which is abuse prevention restraining orders. That's the typical one you hear about. There are also harassment prevention restraining orders where you don't need to have a domestic relationship with someone, but they're bothering you in some way, and you might be able to get a restraining order for that. So we go to court, we get another 200 to 300 clients there, and then we have a small, burgeoning, but growing program at Emerson Hospital. And there, the social workers will call us in, and often the patient is there, which makes it very much safer for us to be able to interact with them.
Thank you so much, Jackie and Jolene, for all of your information and what you do for the community day in and day out, providing that support and that comfort when people need it the most. You are wonderful, and I thank you so much for joining us today.